I want to talk to you about two different ways to live your life. One with the theme of self-preservation, and then the other with the theme of self-realization. And let's just look at examples of each of these things. So self-preservation, preservation, to preserve. Self-preservation, preservation, wow. Self-preservation, to preserve the self, living in survival mode, basically, going through the motions just to stay alive, right? Going through the motions of all the things you have to do, all those responsible aspects of retaining your human life, right? So you have to eat, you have to, in modern days, have a source of income in order to have a roof over your head, etc. So those things that are preserving just you being alive, which most people live their life doing, which is fine if that's all they want to do. But if you're yearning inside for something more, you might realize right now that you are living via a self-preservation mindset or lifestyle, let's say. So if you are ready to stop only surviving, right, you have to step into self-realization. So, realization, to realize. So what does this involve? How do you realize yourself? Like, oh, I'm here, I'm a human, I have an arm, an elbow is on both arms actually, and I live in this home, and that's a mirror behind me, right? That was a bad example. But self-realization, realizing the self, right? So you don't need, so anything basically beyond just surviving that has to do with you and who you are and how you are and who you want to be, etc. So maybe you then realize that you have this lack of confidence stemming back to your childhood, or maybe you then realize the relationships in your life currently are the way they are because you grew up with a bad example of what relationships were or what love was, right? So these realizations come from the introspection, come from the observing of the self, of you, of yourself. No one else can do this for you because they don't actually know like the innermost workings of your mind, right? They can tell you what they observe your behavior to be like and what they hypothesize that behavior is coming from, but nobody else can actually pinpoint it for you. They don't know your childhood. They can't tell you that you are not confident now because of your childhood. You know, all of this stuff, which is also why it's the hardest and most to do, is because it all has to do with you. You have to do it. Self-realization, self, right? Just like you are the one who goes to work to make your money, for self-preservation, you are the one who gets the groceries, consumes the food for self-preservation. You are also the one and the only one that can thrive in your self-realization. And that's another good way of putting it too, whereas self-preservation is just surviving. And self-realization is where you begin to thrive. Because once you start realizing things about yourself and your mind and the way you think and the way you behave and why you behave that way, then you could start making those immense changes, right? You can start working towards being confident once you realize the source of your lack of confidence, or just the fact that you don't have confidence. Once you realize that, you can begin to do something about it. And having confidence, developing it, is going to help in every single area of your life, even the areas that have to do with preservation. So for preservation, you are maintaining this job, right? And you've been in the same role at that company for years. Once you realize that you are lacking confidence, and then you begin to develop the confidence, then perhaps you take that confidence you gain from self-realization and apply it to the job. Go into your boss's office and ask for a raise or a promotion, etc., right? Or maybe you just have a job that you aren't happy with, right? You just have it just because, right? It pays the bills and this is as good as life gets, right? But then you go through your self-realization and you realize what your actual passion is. And then you realize, wait, people are making money doing what my passion is. Maybe I can do that. So if you want to stay the same, right, in your comfort zone, in survival mode, self-preservation all the way. But when you want to get into the deeper things in life, immense happiness and joy, confidence, self-worth, self-esteem, etc., that comes from self-realization. And sure, your childhood was great, and so you don't necessarily even need to realize that you lacked confidence to have confidence. Perhaps you're just you're someone who has always had confidence. It doesn't mean that there aren't things to then realize about yourself still. Perhaps you're a very confident person, so you don't need to realize your lack of confidence or where your lack of confidence came from, but you are someone who struggles with staying committed to goals or procrastination, right? That insight or that awareness comes from the realization of the self. So self-preservation, forgot the word, and self-realization, very different ways to live life, okay? And it doesn't mean you have to choose one or the other. I mean, sure, of course you need an income source if you want to eat and have a roof or whatever, or put gas in, or to get a car, or to put gas into your car to go to do all of the passionate things in your life that you have realized are your passion through your self-realization. So both of these things can tie very much into one another. However, it's very often that the people that are just in survival mode, that are just living life to preserve their life or their body, right? These people, the ones that are feeling that lack, like there has to be something more to life. There's something more out there. Why don't I feel fulfilled or content? You know, like I did all the things. I got a job and I went to school and like, you know, like sometimes I go out with friends, right? Like, but I'm still, there's something, can't describe it because we all know the feeling, right? The feeling of thinking like there's something more, not necessarily out there, but like to life. There's something more to life. I could get more out of this, and I don't want to feel like I have to do things. I want to feel like I want to do things. Those people are usually lacking a strong side of self-realization. And so start thinking about that, maybe. I don't know, if you want to. If you want to feel like you want to do things rather than you have to do things, lean a little more and a little more and a little more towards self-realization. Start realizing things about yourself, where you actually want to live, what you actually want to do, what you're actually passionate about, right? So much of this self-realization, it wasn't taught to us when we were children. We were told what to do. We were told that we had to ask if we could do things. We were told how to be when we get older, right? And so we weren't usually taught like, oh, well, how does that make you feel? Why do you think it makes you feel that way? What do you think that feeling is going to develop into, right? We're not taught these introspective questions or tools when we are younger, and so people don't grow up with this realization aspect of themselves, this introspection way of living or being or as a tool or whatever. And then on top of that, people are often scared as well to realize, because they've spent so much time on this side building up the practicality of life and building up a way to survive, and they've put so many years into this job, etc., they're scared to realize that's not what they wanted. They're scared to realize, oh crap, I might need to go down a completely different path. They're scared what these realizations might bring up, and then the work that will then follow the realizations. So, it's not easy, but it's fulfilling. If you're not content, it will bring you content in the long run. Contentment. It'll bring you contentment in the long run, right? Just realizing, oh, I lack confidence, and it's probably because I was always told I could do better when I was younger. That realization in itself might be enough to like spark something, right? But it's not going to be enough to like change your behaviors and your mindsets about your abilities, right? You then have to do some work. So, self-preservation, self-realization, blend the two beautifully, and or lean way more this way than the other way to fill that feeling of there's something more. What is it? I gotta find it. I need it. I can't keep living because I feel I have to. I want to start living because I want to.